This is Denari Pledge Segmenter Part 3. In this section we want to discuss the output options from Pledge Segmenter. We've already talked a little bit about the Excel output from Pledge Segmenter. There's another one on this list that might be that you might be curious about, and that is the EFT confirmation notice. This is used primarily or exclusively in conjunction with this printed output letter. And what this does, it kind of goes back to the old days of having to have EFT confirmation from the donor, written confirmation from the donor, in order to hit their bank account. And what this does is it produces a form, and you can choose the letter that will appear at the top of that form that you can just put in the mail and mail out to the donor. Nowadays there's other ways to get that permission, but it could still be used if you want, so that option is available. But again, primarily you're going to be using Excel as you run this from Pledge Segmenter. But one of the nice things with Pledge Segmenter, like Name and Gift Segmenter, is that it can be used with other reports. For example, let's go over here to the Pledges tab, and we have 3 reports up here that all pretty much work the same, but they have different outputs. These are all PDF reports. In other words, they're going to come back to your inbox as Adobe Acrobat reports. Let's start by looking at the Pledge Detail Long. And it is exactly like the Pledge Detail Short, except that this has a little more information than the Short does, so you can experiment and see which one works best for you. So we'll look at Pledge Detail Long. Down here at the bottom we've got the Report Variables section, and we can choose here the output order. So when we see pledges, a list of pledges here, and again, anytime you see the word detail, in this case Pledge Detail, we're going to see every pledge. So if John Doe has 5 pledges, you're going to see John Doe on the list 5 times. And so we can put that in order by donor name or by account, whichever you prefer. And then we have the pledge segment field. So what this does then, in fact it's required here, we have to have a pledge segment ahead of time in order to use this. And so we could go over there and create our segment that identifies all the people that are more than 60 days behind, or all the people that have a fulfillment rate of less than 30%, or all the people that created a pledge last week or last month. Any of those filters we want to use over there. We save that segment, and now we can select it here by clicking the little question mark and selecting it off of our list. It becomes now the filter for the report. When we run this, we're going to get the pledge detail format back in our inbox. So it's going to be an Adobe Acrobat file that we can print and see a list of every pledge, along with a lot of the pledge detail or pledge information related to those pledges. So we're confining it to just that group identified by the pledge segment. The name segment field allows us to combine name characteristics with this. So for example, let's say we only want to see those pledges for people that are more than 60 days behind, but also have a certain classification. So we can create the name segment and use a classification there, and we need that name segment because classifications are the only places that we can filter on, or the only places are in Name Segmenter. And so by selecting that name segment then that we've already created, we're confining our output to just those people that are more than 60 days behind in their pledges and have a certain classification. And then of course we can also filter here on start and stop date if we want to, but most of the time you're going to put that start and stop date if you want to in the pledge segment. In fact, I would recommend that you do that and just ignore the start and stop dates here. One of the nice things about these reports is they can be memorized. So if you haven't seen this before, I'm not going to go through it in great detail here, but basically this section up here allows us to select a frequency. So for example, we could say monthly, and then we could choose a distribution, which most of the time is going to be this file queue email notification. And here we would type in a list of emails. It could just be one email. If you're going to put multiple emails, you'll separate them by a comma. Choose the registered emailer, which is somebody from your organization who is represented as sending the email, and then put in a note. And finally down here, the day of the month that we want this to run. So we could choose you know, the first of the month or whatever day we want. So automatically then on that date, Denari is going to go and run this report. And by the way, we would click on Save as a memorized report up here rather than Submit Request. Submit Request will run the report. So that just simply means that Denari is going to memorize this thing, save it, and run it on the first of every month so that we could see a list of all the people who are, let's say, 60 days behind in their pledges. That's just going to come to us on a regular basis. Going back to this Pledges tab here, again we see the Pledge Detail Short works exactly the same way. Pledge Summary does the same thing, same fields, except that it's going to give us kind of a summary of all of our information. So in summary form, we're going to see the pledges that are more than 60 days behind, if that's the segment we're using, but it's going to summarize all the numbers. We're not going to see the detail of that. Now, also on this Pledges tab, we have pledge statements. A pledge statement by default in Denari is an 8.5 by 11 page that the top 2/3 more or less are a letter body that you create ahead of time, and then the bottom third is the pledge information. So here's where we would select that letter, whatever it is you've created and want to say to your donors. The calculation date is the date kind of as of. The statistics for the pledge are being calculated as of a certain date. Usually that's the date you're running the statements. The account number field allows us to print a statement for just one person if we want to, and of course if we're doing it to more than one person or sending to more than one, we're going to leave that blank. And then we come to this pledge segment field. The pledge segment field allows us to filter and get only a set of pledges again. So for example, some folks, as I said earlier, only want to send pledge statements to people who are maybe more than 60 days behind, or just people who are behind in general on their pledges. Whatever that is, you can create that filter there in pledge segment and then link that here, and that becomes the filter for the statement. So the only people who are going to get pledge statements then are, in this case, those people who are more than 60 days behind, or again, whatever filters you want to use. We can choose an output order here. We can have envelopes and or labels printed at the same time. And then we come to the pledge statement or the statement format field. There's three options. One pledge per page simply means that if the donor has more than one pledge, Denari is going to create multiple pages for that pledge. So if they have 3 pledges, then Denari is going to create 3 pages, 1 pledge per page. The one donor per page multi-pledge per page means that if they have more than 1 pledge, it's going to put all that pledge information on 1 page. In other words, 1 page per donor. And then the sponsorship option here works the same as the multi-pledge, except that it's going to add some sponsorship fields. So you'll have to decide which one of these formats works best for you. And then finally we come to this name segment to exclude. This can actually be a little bit confusing, but what you're doing here is choosing a group of people, if you want to, and this is optional, but you're choosing a group of people that you don't want to send statements to that may be in this pledge segment output. So for example, you might not want to send pledge statements to the staff or to the board members or some other group of people. So you can create a classification called staff or board members and assign that to all those folks, and then create a name segment that identifies who they are. So go into classes in and choose staff or board member and save that name segment. Now you can select that here, and it kind of works in reverse. Denari is going to go and run the pledge segment and find all the people that should be getting statements, and then it's going to run the name segment and take that group of people and pull them out of that list. So then you're basically kind of using that as an exclusionary kind of thing there. And again, this is optional, so you don't have to use that. So again, the statements, you're going to click on Submit Request, and you'll get those back in your inbox in a PDF format, which you can then mail out to your donors. Now let's take one look at name segmenter quickly, just to show you the pledge field, and you probably remember this. I'm just going to pick one here, a name segment. Over here on the right, as it opens, we see the pledge segment field right under the Classes Out button. That simply allows us to take a pledge segment. Again, it could be those people that are more than 60 days behind pledge segment, and link to the name segment, which then allows us to those pledge characteristics to become filters for the name segment. We can now output those names of people related to those pledges in any name segment format that we want. For example, we might do a mass mailing to all those people. We might do an email to all those people. So we can then turn those pledge characteristics into name segment output. That concludes Pledge Segmenter.